Pilgrim. Oh, hello. Today I am super excited for this special holiday edition of Conversations with a Passion Pilgrim. Today I'm inviting on my brother Kyle, he's actually celebrating his 2-year clean date today after about an 18-year drug addiction. So we're hey guys. I know you guys have all been waiting. I feel like I'm late to the party myself. I just got caught up in traffic and I'm just super excited to share my brother, and really this is a big piece of my heart, and it's really cool that we're celebrating this date today. Hi, Mom. And yeah, I'm so excited. It's the journey that Kyle has been on is truly remarkable. It really, and it comes from a place of, there's been a lot of darkness, and that's just the real shit, because that's what we're here for. We're here to have real conversations about real things that are going on. And the holidays are a particularly hard time for a lot of people. What is it? One of the spiritual teachers out there says, if you think you're so enlightened, go spend a week with your family. So not only can being together with all your friends and family or talking to them a lot, because I know there's a lot of COVID restrictions going on, that can bring up a lot of things. And then for those who are feeling quite lonely, it can bring up a lot of that stuff as well. I know that the rate of relapse and overdose and suicide goes up in December and January and around the holidays. So I just want to bring on a bit of a success story right now, and also just a real conversation with somebody who's really inspired a lot in my life, which is my older brother. So we're just waiting for him to join on here. Kyle, if you're watching, you just need to click. Just need to just waiting for Kyle now. We just need you to click to join and request to join. So let me just see where he is. Oh, there he is. So Kyle, yeah, if you're watching, just at the bottom, click to join. Or maybe let's see if I can. Oh, there we go. Maybe I can send you a request. So, but yeah, just like long story short is, oh, there he is. Fucking ready.
Yeah.
You shave for us and everything. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. I'm like stumbling over my words this morning because it's been a little bit of a chaotic morning for me. And then I was like, oh my God, is it actually 8:59 right now? I'm like walking in the door. I still have to go to the bathroom. So anyway, thanks for waiting. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I was up late last night counting down to the strike of midnight.
I know, that was really sweet when you messaged me. You're like, yeah, I'm 2.5 hours away. I'm like, fuck yeah, it's like New Year's.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, it was definitely my biggest Christmas present this year was the fact that I'd be taking 2 years on Boxing Day.
Yeah. So. And for all of us too, like, it's so crazy. Like I remember so many and like for anybody, so basically it's weird because like I've never actually interviewed somebody that's my family on here. So it's like we actually know each other so deep that it's weird to be talking in public about these private conversations that we have. But yeah, like for me, I know growing up and like the amount of Christmases that you weren't there for, like, and wondering where you were, or yeah, it's just been a lot. And I think it's like such a beautiful Christmas present for all of us too, that like we know we know you're safe, like we know you're happy. It's like it just makes thing, it's like, oh fuck, we can relax now. Like
yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
Well, and it's the same for me, right? Spending a lot of Christmases without a family. I created those families I could on the streets, but obviously it's never the same, right? And I never know where I'd be waking up Christmas, right? And so this year I was pretty special, to know where I was going to wake up. And last year was huge because I was in a recovery house, right? Like I was just leaving the recovery house. It was kind of like my first Christmas on my own. But it was, that first year of sobriety is like just literally staying sober. That's it. That's all you worry about every day is just don't pick up drugs or alcohol today. That's it. And the second year was like I had to start to learn how to live in the world, right? And go shopping for Christmas, Christmas shopping's new for me. I spent many years where I just walked around the malls and grabbed what I wanted for Christmas. So this whole paying for things was a little bit new for me. But it felt good, right? To finally be able to get in the spirit. And yeah, I've really enjoyed Christmas this year, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit, like, what is it? There's a couple questions that I could very easily ask you, and I like to kind of just go deep right away. Tell us about, part of me wants to talk about Christmas and what Christmas was like as an addict. And then the other part of me wants to talk about, after 18 years, 15 years of those doing heroin. So for everybody that's listening, um, yeah, it was pretty hardcore for a really long time. And I'd love for you just to share a little bit about who you are and your story so that people can connect with you, and what ultimately led to you getting clean. So whatever kind of feels like natural to come out right now.
Um, Christmas for me for a long time, I because I was a survivor on the streets, I used Christmas as a time of the year. Like obviously I numbed my pain every day with drugs, but Christmas I used the holidays for my advantage, mainly in the malls and stuff because I knew they were full and I knew I could do a lot of crime. And I had a lot of pain to bear at the same time. So I believe my addiction constantly peaked around Christmas time because it
Yeah.
was a time that I could really dwell on my self pity, right? Oh, woe is me. I'm alone again. Why do I deserve this? Um, I was incarcerated during Christmas.
Yeah.
Like I've kind of had a lot of different aspects of Christmas. Really though, I can't say I was lonely and I made it about me. But besides that, it was just another day.
Mm-hmm.
My biggest hype, as I said about Christmas, was the fact that the malls were full and I could get away with stuff.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I tried not to focus on family very much because that, as I said, I would dwell on it, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I love how like real you're being with actually what went on during that time, because whether people are deep in an addiction or not, I think that loneliness and that pain comes up a lot around the holiday season. And to admit that you're spending a lot of time escaping it and numbing it and playing it down, negating joy, like engaging in a holiday season is like engaging in the holiday spirit is like a joyful thing that, like, yeah, it's just another day, but like you can choose whether or not you want to make it awesome. And so yeah, I really appreciate how you're saying and really admitting to the fact that you just tried to really downplay any possibility of it being like magical.
yeah, there's no magical to it, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Christmas morning, in my experience and on the streets, is yeah, a bunch of addicts are gonna get together, and I was an IV user. We would cheers our needles and we would do dope like every other day, and now and again you'd talk about your family a little bit. But really, for most of us, we weren't going to spend the day talking about our family because then we were spending the day in pain. And that was the whole idea of doing the drugs, was to mask the pain. So
Mm-hmm.
for us to sit there and dwell on it was not, for me, it was definitely not something I wanted to do. I knew
Yeah.
I had a family out there, right? And I think that a lot of the time set me apart from a lot of people out there, right? Um, Most of my friends in addiction, they didn't have families that wanted them home. They didn't have families that cared for them, right? You know, I had a family that cared for me very much, that wanted to be there. But, I had a mother that also learned so much addiction that she knew she couldn't fix my problem, you know? Not to
Yeah.
say she didn't march her ass into a lot of my trap houses and
Yeah.
come and find me. And, as uncomfortable as it may have made her, she got to know the people that were in that house. She didn't walk in that house with a scowl on her face or nothing. She accepted every person in there, as if they were her own.
Yeah.
And, she met me where I was at. at the time. You know what I mean? And I think that's really important for people to hear is, you know, sometimes you got to meet that addict where they're at. And as much as the addict is a selfish person at the time, yeah, they are. But it takes some unselfish acts sometimes, I think, to pull them out of the fire. And I think that's really important, right? And, you know, my addiction, I talked to mom about it today. Like, I don't have that story where I was raised in the ghetto. I don't have that story where I was raised in social housing or anything like that. I was raised in a $750,000 home. I was raised, you know, with brothers and sisters and pretty much a silver spoon. I got everything I needed. I got everything I could ever ask for. But there was events that happened in my childhood that affected me later on. And, you know, I come from a father who was an addict. And that is in, you know, that's how I'm wired. And I knew I learned very early how to numb my pain.
Mm-hmm.
And that was with drugs and alcohol, right? Um, you know, the events that happened to me as a child, I've talked openly about them, right? I was molested. And, you know, I was fortunate in the fact I had a family that was there, but it didn't undo what was done, you know? And then losing a father, you know, my biological father, very young, left a void in me, you know, a void that I still feel today. It's just the not knowing, right? It's just, you know, right? And because he's not tangible for me. I can't touch him. I can never see him. And for me, that is, I carried that, right? And then, you know, I lost both my best friends in the whole world when I was very young. And, you know, they both died tragically. And they both died due to drugs and alcohol. And that put me in a downward spiral, right? And it really, it kind of set the course. And as I stayed in addiction, you know, I tried to jump out at times. You know, I had a kid when I was 18, but that just, that was too much for me. I couldn't handle it, you know? So thank God I had a mom that stepped in for that son so that I could just continue doing what I was doing because I couldn't be a father, right? And then, you know, I tried the same thing again a couple of years later. And, you know, once again, I had to bolt because I couldn't do it. And, you know, I built a family on the streets. I did. I built another family. And, you know, like my best friend on the streets went into recovery yesterday. You know, my best friend in this whole world went into the recovery yesterday, you know, and without that man, I would not be here today. He's brought me back from many, many deaths scenarios. He protected me on those streets, right? And to see, you know, an opioid crisis and, you know, the amount of friends I lost in the last 17 years and then the amount of friends I've lost since I've been in recovery is ridiculous. I can't count. And it's hard, right? And your other question was about me coming into recovery. You know, when I lived in Victoria, I ran on a lot of ego. I knew everybody. Everybody knew who my best friend, which I call my brother, and I were. And I never was homeless, you know. I generally had a vehicle, I generally had money, and I generally could just do what I wanted to do. And, you know, and life was pretty good. I had some extreme ups where I thought that I was the man, right? I had arrived, and that buried the pain, right? Because if I was succeeding, if I could walk around with the pocket full of money and a new car and everything, then everybody would think everything was okay. You know, I had the new clothes and the shoes. You know, I was 130 pounds, but in the mirror, I felt okay because I based everything on what I had, right? It wasn't based on who I was anymore. I based all of my accomplishments on what I had to show.
And I want to pause there for a second. And for anyone watching, the thing that I love and the reason I wanted to share your story is like going back to meeting people where they're at. I remember you and I got a lot closer the moment I accepted that you were going to go around the corner and smoke heroin. And so we just started connecting on what's your day like. I remember being in your trailer and just like actually inquiring about who you are and like realizing I'm like, oh yeah, I totally understand that pattern. And like you were telling me about how you love to decorate things and like, you know, stuff like, and I was like, me too, buddy. Like, you know, and you know, taking that time to get to know somebody, meet them where they're at. And then what you're saying right now of, I thought who I was what I had. I mean, that's like the human condition. And
Yeah.
so for anybody who's sitting on the other side right now, oh, sneakerhead shy, what's going on here? So what's going on here is I'm chatting to my brother about his 2-year clean date, which is today. And he's been 2 years clean after an 18-year addiction. So please stay in. So yeah, going back to what you were saying about like, yeah, identifying with all the things that you have and the ego and all of this stuff. I mean, I come from like the yoga spiritual background, and like it's the same shit. Like we talk about the same stuff in yoga class, and when like any human being, the thing about your story is that every single person can relate with the words that you're saying if they look in the fucking mirror and they're honest with themselves. So I just wanted to like, for
Yeah.
anybody who thinks that they're not an addict and this doesn't apply to them, like I encourage you to like really listen, really sink in and look and be like, okay, where can this apply in my life? And just really listen from an open space. So anyway.
Um, and I think, you know, you touched there the decorating and stuff. And it's funny because, you know, I've spent Christmases with, I don't want to say who, but like I spent Christmas with a girlfriend and her father. And, you know, it was considered a normal Christmas. You know, we had a house and there was a big turkey dinner and there was presents. And the only difference is every hour we would all go to the bathroom and do a shot of dope,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but it wasn't, but that became the norm to me. Right. And, you know, I think it's really, people see addicts at their worst. And I think that's really important, you know. Um, it was easy to look at me if you knew me, my family, and be able to tell kind of where I was at by my weight, by, you know, and, you know, by how I was acting and things like that. But I think the general public, they see somebody that's struggling and they always want to point fingers and call them an addict and call that. But like, do they really know that person? Like, what happened to that person? Why are they like that? You know, and that's what I've learned a lot in the program, you know, of Narcotics Anonymous is like, we all have trauma. You know,
Mm-hmm.
my addiction wasn't, and this is, I don't, this is something I really strongly believe in. I didn't choose to be an addict. I didn't choose to walk out on my family, my children, you know, everything I ever loved. It wasn't a choice. It was a mechanism, a coping mechanism that's ingrained in me, you know. And once I start using drugs or alcohol, yeah, I have an obsession, and it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't stop. And it doesn't matter how much anybody loves me. I can't stop. And I think that's where people get it mixed up because they're like, well, you made a choice to get up and go rob that person, or you made a choice to do this. No, we're wired differently, you know? And I always use the kind of explanation, you know, when a normie drinks a drink or does, you know, a little bit of dope, a firework goes off in their brain. When someone like myself, you know, or friends that I have, right, that are addicts, when we do drugs, it's like a fucking fireworks show that goes
Yeah.
off in our brain. It's not the same, right? People are different. And I feel like people want to shame constantly about, you know, funding for recovery houses and detoxes and things like that. But do they shame people for having cancer? Because that's a disease too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's where I think the world is lacking, is they're not learning. They're not, you know what I mean? And that's where I appreciate my family so much, you know, especially my mom who really stepped out and was like, and did the research, you know, and found out what I was going through. You know, one of the biggest moments in my recovery is like my mom came into a meeting and sat beside me. And when it was her turn, she said, "My son's an addict." Like, you know, that like touched my heart because, you know, to have your mother sit beside you and admit, you know, to the whole world and to be okay with it, you know, to support me. And my family has done that, you know, they've supported me through this. Nobody looks down upon me and my family, you know, and that's, I think, where I see so many people go wrong is I see them go and they get into recovery and their families continue to shame them and shame and but you did this, but you did that, but you did this. And I don't think it doesn't help the addict. Don't get me wrong, my family had boundaries, you know, and they still have boundaries, but we have an open dialogue. And I think that's where the world is missing. You know, it's not about shaming the addict, it's about helping them. And I just, that standing beside that addict, not enabling them, but standing beside them will help save their life. You know, I was always shown love. And when I was in that coma, you know, I came to out of that coma for 10 seconds and I knew my mom's name and I knew where she was. I knew inside where I could get help. You know what I mean? Like I knew who they had to call, and I can't explain it. I don't really remember it, obviously, you know? And I believe that that's from love, and that's love is something you can't pretend, right? So I believe that people need to educate themselves more about addiction, you
Yeah.
know, and understand it's not choice. It's a disease that we have, and it's something that's never going to go away. It's not curable. I'm never going to be able to ingest any sort of alcohol or drugs because the moment I do, I go right back to day one, you know, and my chances of making it back into this room would be, you know, close to none. And I just think the world needs to realize that, like, it's a disease.
Yeah.
And your other question you wanted to ask was like, what kind of got me to that point? Um,
You're just rolling along here. You're like, yep, and this is this, and this is this. And I just like, for me, it's like, it was really obviously emotional for me when you bring up that story of mom because I fucking lived it, you know, like it's like, you know, aside, you know, also with mom, like, you know, when you're a family, like I love what you talk about with the compassion piece because thanks, Dee Dee. She's like, she's awesome. She's always on the things. It's beautiful what you're talking about the compassion piece because something that like I really feel in myself is a ability to have compassion for people in situations that maybe aren't as accepted because of going through this with you. And when you talk about you know, we talk about loving an addict, and there's people on here that do love people that are addiction and they don't know how to deal with it because it's incredibly triggering. And, you know, it's fucking crazy to be on that roller coaster or to even watch the coaster. But I remember, you know, so for the people that are listening, I mean, the countless times that you've been overdosed, near death, in a coma, rolled up in a carpet, like found in really the worst ways ever. um, Getting that call and then all the time in between worrying about every time mom called me and she's like, do you got a minute? And I'm like, oh fuck, what's happened? When really she just wants to tell me I got a piece of mail. But living like that for 15 years, you know, so like 15 years ago I was 17, you know, and then
yeah,
when this started I was like 13. and and as a sister, and I mean, you played with me since I came home from the hospital. So it's like you're all I know, you know?
yeah,
And to go through this and to I remember, you know, whether it was the anger or whatever, and it would make me feel so sad when you wouldn't call me, you know, because like you were ashamed. And I remember near the end of it, and like when I left Canada and I moved over to Asia 3 years ago, and you were still sick, and like we'd have chats, and it was like, fuck, like I may have to come home one day because you'll be gone. And I just feared that so much. And mom feared coming to visit me because we weren't sure what was going to happen with you. And Um, but I remember the one thing of everything you're saying before I rambled too much is the power of ensuring completeness in a relationship in a way that really isn't about me, you know, like I knew, um, Fariel will get to this in a sec. She's awesome. Yeah, she'll be enjoying this answer. Um, the one thing that I had to get really complete with in all of my own anger, in all of my own sadness, and in all of the ways that I was experiencing your addiction is if you died tomorrow, how would I be okay with that? And the only way that I would be okay with that is if we were on talking terms and you knew that I loved you. And that's why, like, for me, it was never, I just could never talk to you again and give you the cold shoulder, even though you fucking deserved it. It was like, I just knew that no matter what happens to you, you know your sister loves you, and you knew your mommy loved you, and you knew your family loved you. And I think for people that are loving addicts out there, whether it's a friend, family, partner, whatever it is, there's a way to have boundaries. And there's no magic formula of how do you establish boundaries with your
Yeah.
addict that you love, but there is a way to have boundaries and also have compassion at the same time. And so I just love what you touched on about how helpful that actually was for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just really touched my heart. So let's get into the juicy bit that everybody really wants to know is how the fuck did you do it? Why now? And like when we were all like, we all knew you were capable of getting clean. We just didn't know we were going to believe in that. You know, so
Well,
what changed? Or if there was going to be that thing inside of you that clicked, I guess it's because again, you're talking about, it's not a choice, but there was that moment where finally it clicked
yeah.
to you.
Every addict is capable of change. That I
Yeah.
want to be said.
Yeah.
I've never met an addict that's not capable. I believe addicts are some of the smartest people you'll ever meet. You
I do
know,
too.
um, the street smarts we have, reading situations, reading people. Dad said it today. Addicts should have a university degree because we know how to deal with people in a whole different capacity.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, like, I went across Canada on one of my I had a warrant out, and my girlfriend had gotten locked up, and I needed to get out of town, and a buddy of mine got a bunch of money, so it seemed like a great idea, right? Typical addict, pick up and let's go try something else somewhere else, right? And of course, I was going to change, of course, right? That was my plan. By the time we were headed to Nova Scotia, and by the time I got there, I was going to be clean.
Yeah.
And it took us 3.5 weeks to get from Vancouver to Thunder Bay, Ontario, which is about a 3-day drive. I didn't stop using the entire way, right? We had money, the guy had a lot of money with him, so I knew where to find drugs. I was a mover, so I knew people to get drugs from all over Canada, all across. And we ended up landing in Thunder Bay, right? He rode off his truck. He fell asleep at the wheel, told the police the dog jumped on him, and here I was in Thunder Bay with this guy who I called a friend, but really I didn't know him very well. He just had a lot of money, so it seemed like a good idea. And I started doing the same thing here, right? We were living in a hotel, ordering drugs, doing whatever I felt like. But all of a sudden the money was getting low, right? And which put our friendship on the rocks, right? Because then he started resenting me. And, and our friendship in a matter of days fell apart. And here I was with a fallen friendship. He had control of the money. He had control of it all. And I'm in this city across Canada. And I woke up one morning and he was gone. And my ID was gone. Any of my clothes were gone. I had nothing. I was absolutely homeless. So I did what every addict does. I made some friends and tried to fit in. And I bounced around a lot of the places in Thunder Bay. I tried to do what I always did and start selling drugs, but Thunder Bay is ran by some gangs, and I'm from BC. I had no connections in any of those gangs. You know, I was really, you know, up shit creek because I couldn't run on a reputation or who I knew or not. There was nothing to get me out of what I was in. So I was backed in a corner. So I remember I went to detox, and I had 17 years in addiction. I had never done detox. For me, I don't believe in methadone. I don't believe in Suboxone. I know it helps some people. I think that's awesome. But for me, you give me anything like that, I'm just going to abuse it. You know, the only time I ever did Suboxone was in prison for a cheap high. I could snort it. So I never really, you know, it never did anything for me any good. So I went in and I kicked hard in this detox, you know, and I called mom, of course, right? Here I was, got 5 days under my belt, you know, and it was an ugly 5 days. You know, I do actually want to mention that, you know, I've said it in many meetings out here, and like, you know, that day in detox, you know, I sat in a shower and I didn't know how to wash my body sober. I didn't know what to do. I was sick. I was sitting in a shower crying. I had no clothes except what I walked in. You know, I had never been in a situation where I wasn't showering. You know what I mean? Like, I was beat. And so I called my mom, and of course I asked for help, right? But I couldn't get on an airplane. I didn't have ID. I couldn't get on a train. So like any good addict, I expected that she would drive across Canada to come pick me up and take me home. But that wasn't the case, right? I remember pleading with her on the phone, and the lady in the detox, when I got off the phone, she's like, "Oh, she's a hard one, eh?" And I was like, "Yeah, we've been through this a few times." But I pleaded with her because they were going to put me in a homeless shelter, right? And I'd never been in a homeless shelter. I was way too bougie for that, right? And I remember saying to mom, like, "Man, they're going to put me in a homeless shelter." And she's like, "Well, you did pretty good in a maximum security prison. I'm sure you can do it in a homeless shelter." Yeah. Right? And so I knew I was screwed there, right? So of course I got off the phone, and it was my turn to leave detox, right? I couldn't get into a recovery house. They were all full. And this is a situation all over Canada, right? So here I was, and it was like, well, okay, are you guys going to give me a cab to the, you know, to the shelter? No, we'll give you a bus ticket, right? My ego again was struck. And so I ended up getting on this bus, and I made it 5 minutes on the bus, and I was right back in a hotel doing dope. You know, the moment I saw it, because I needed a coping mechanism, right? I just got let down. I just got released. I was scared. I was angry. And what do I do when I'm scared, angry, happy, or any other emotion? I run to drugs. And so that's what I did. And I was in that hotel for a few days. And then I made it to to the Salvation Army. That Salvation Army, when I went there, I met this guy that was there, and he's an AA guy. He'd been sober a long time, and he passed me. It was an AA book. He said, "Why don't you check this out?" And I was kind of humming and hawing, but I'll flip some pages, right? And he told me of some meetings in the area. Why don't I check those out? So I went to a couple meetings, and I did this for probably 2 weeks. But it was like, I'd get a day, I'd use for a few days. I'd get a day, I'd use for just up and down, up and down. I couldn't land it. You know what I mean? I started doing a little volunteer work there, though, trying to do the laundry. I'd wash floors, cleaning the bathrooms. That'll break anybody's ego in a homeless shelter.
Yeah.
And I just really, you know, I was trying, but nothing was clicking, because still in the back of my head, you know, I had that thought, well, maybe I can make it here. This time will be different, right? Like, maybe I can pull this off, right? And it was Christmas morning, maybe mid-afternoon, and a guy OD'd right in front of me in the shelter. And I remember running. I got help, and they were carting him off, and he had dropped a needle full of fentanyl on the ground. and I picked that needle up. I went into the bathroom and I did it. For me, that was like, that was a kick in the face, because I went from thinking I was all that, you know, the vehicles, my whole life flashed through my eyes, right? When I had done really good in the drug world, when I had done really bad, but I had never been to the point where I picked up,
It's on here.
yeah, I've never been to the point where I had picked up a needle and did it off the ground, and I did. But something clicked that day, because that was a rock bottom for me. You know, here I was, and I had picked up a needle and I had done it, and I was living in a homeless shelter, and you know, I didn't know what to do. I was absolutely out of options, and you know, I reached out to that guy, good friend of mine. His name's Robert, who works at the Salvation Army, and I was like, okay, like I need help. Like this is bad. And I admitted to using there, which should have got me kicked out. But we talked about it, and we talked about what I was feeling. And he recommended a place called 3Cs. And I applied, and it took me about 3 weeks before I got in, and I got in. They said if I could piss clean coming out of a homeless shelter, I was allowed to stay. I could come in, and that's what I did. I still had a lot of reservations, right? At first, I was going in there, but I was very guarded. I went in there with that street jail mentality. Don't talk to me, stay away from me, like everybody fuck off, right? I didn't know how to deal with confrontation when somebody said something I didn't like. You know, it was puffy chest, anger right away.
Like a lot of people in.
Yeah, but instead of just kicking me out, they took each one of those situations and they broke it down with me.
Mm.
And you know, another person that I had met at Salvation Army, one of the attendants, Candace, she was working at a place called Norwest Community Health Center, and she asked me about volunteering, and so I started volunteering, and that was just helping. And I'm not, I say I did this, but for a lot of people it would be too close for them, but I chose to, and I started giving out needles and pipes and all that harm reduction supplies to people once or twice a week. I started going out with the soup truck on Thursday nights to bring out gloves or socks, or, you know what I mean? Just making that connection, giving back. You know, I spent a whole life, I felt, you know, 20 years with violence and stealing and ripping people off and treating people like shit. And it was like, I needed to do something positive. And I feel that was kind of the point. It started to click for me. You know, I had a really good sponsor who was walking me through the steps, which is doing the work. And, you know, in the program, I switched over to Narcotics Anonymous. That is that's home for me. That's where I feel safe. And I started to really reach out. There was two ladies in there, Brenda and Serena. They took me under their wing. They really did. And, you know, they're kind of like who I call mom and dad out here. And they started to connect me with people. Because connection is huge. You know, connection has been probably one of the, you know, I've heard so many people say, I think the opposite of addiction is connection. And
It is.
yeah,
Cool. I remember
I believe that.
I shared that video with you about what they did in Portugal. And it was when you were still youth, but I can't remember. Do you remember that video I shared with you? Maybe not,
Yeah.
but I remember when there was this video that went viral, like maybe 4 years ago, and it was talking about how they dealt with addiction in Portugal, and they legalized everything and spent all the money that they would usually use to like catch everybody being bad, and they put it all into like rehabilitation and community things, because they said the opposite of addiction is connection.
Yeah.
And in that, it's a really good, so for anybody that's watching, go to YouTube and I don't know, Google like Portugal addiction, whatever, I don't know, but the rate of like addicts, and they were dealing with a lot of heroin over there too. The rate of addicts went down by like 90% or something crazy like that. It was
Yeah,
so
I don't
great.
doubt it.
Yeah. So anyway, continue.
So I started getting kind of in the groove, right? Of recovery. And, you know, I made lots of mistakes. I've made pretty much every mistake you can make in recovery, but I never picked up, right? And, you know, I continued to work closely with sponsors, um, just with people that are involved in Narcotics Anonymous. And I started getting involved actually in Narcotics Anonymous, whether it was chairing meetings or opening up meetings or, you know, making coffee or, you know, and I pretty much started, I switched. As a drug addict, my interests were drugs. I knew everything about drugs. I knew the lifestyle. I knew whatever it took. I knew how to make them. I knew all that. So I started to put that same effort into studying recovery and to really digging deep and trying to understand it and realizing that my biggest problem in life was me, right? My biggest problem was how I dealt with things, how I looked at the world, right? I always focused on the bad. You know, I always looked at why me? Why, you know, what do I do to deserve this? You know, and it was just self pity. And once I was able to stop thinking that I was this special case and that I was this, you know, special addict and realized I was just another addict, and you know, what I needed to do was being laid out right in front of me. You know, it didn't say in there, go get a job or go get a girlfriend or go do this. It told me to work on myself. And, you know, once I started to actually work on myself, things started to come together. You know, I continued to volunteer and my life started coming together. Um, then when I was about 9.5 months, I moved out of 3Cs and I moved into what they call in Ontario is a 3/4 of the way house.
Hmm.
And that is an apartment building for addicts that are in recovery, kind of what they call long-term recovery. And, you know, you get a roommate in the beginning and there's counselors on site. And I thought that was going to be great. Soon as I moved in there, I put my recovery on the back burner. I got a job and I started to at Norwest, which was awesome. I was an outreach worker, but I started to focus just on that. And, you know, about a month into that, I found myself in a hotel with this girl that I was chasing, and she was shooting dope, and there I am sitting there. But hey, I can handle this. I thought, you know, like I'm an outreach worker. I got this, you know. And it came down to one night she asked me if I wanted some, and I sat there for 45 minutes thinking about that before I picked up that phone and I called somebody. I said, "Get me out of here." You know, I came that close, and that's why I say, you know, like for me, if my recovery is not number one, I hate to say it, but I'm fucked. You know,
Hmm.
this is not curable, and I think that's really important for people to know, like, and families, because you know I see people come into this program and they do their treatment center or whatever, and then their family's like, okay, perfect, you can come home, and it doesn't go like that. You can't just walk out of the treatment center and say you're cured.
Yeah,
You
you
know,
can't realize it.
I have to do this every day when I wake up in the morning, and this is just my story, but I pray. When I go to bed at night, I pray and I practice my recovery all day long, because the moment I put anything else first, I'm pretty much fucked. You know, my family, you know, and loved ones, yeah, they come second. My recovery has to have come first,
Hmm.
because without that recovery, I don't have anything. The job's gone, the apartment's gone, my connection with my family, higher power, that's all gone. And I think people really need to hear that is like, it is a lifetime that you need to work on ourselves, like for, you know, somebody in recovery. And um, this year in my recovery has been amazing. Um, I continue to work at Norwest. I got a job at the local shelter. You know, I now drive for the van at the shelter, and we pick up some of the struggling people in this city. We take them to the hospital. We take them to the nearest shelter. Um, We offer gloves, mitts, food, whatever we can do, right? It's my way of giving back. So, I work that Monday to Friday at Norwest, and on the weekends, I do that. And I work with the homeless as much as I can because I know what they're going through. And I'm tired of seeing people get jobs in this industry of homelessness and outreach and stuff that are running on these educations, which is fantastic. Education is great, but they don't know what it feels like, you know? They don't know that the words they may say or the frustration they may show could impact somebody, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Addicts, we have a hard outer shell, but we're soft inside, right?
Yeah.
And we can read people better than maybe they can read themselves sometimes. So I try to be that person that understands the addicts because I've been there and I can put myself in their shoe. Um, and I feel that pain. And I think that's a really important thing for people to know is that, as an addict, I was treated like shit. And it's not just I was treated by shit by people walking down the road. I've been beaten numerous times by the police. Sometimes I deserved it. I'll say that. But a lot of the time I didn't. Emergency rooms, hospitals, those are a nightmare for addicts. Absolute nightmare. You are treated like a piece of shit because all they do is think you're there for free drugs, you know? And that's not the case. That's not the case. And it goes back to that comment earlier about we're not there because of choice, and I think that's where, even the upper levels of government and things like that, they don't understand addiction and they want everybody to go get treatment. But you can call any detox center in Canada and you're waiting 3 to 5 days before you even get in. So that addict gets that idea that they want to get clean today. They better hold that idea for 3 to 5 days and have a safe place to go. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean?
Yeah, and
Even
it's
once
like,
you're done at the detox center, okay, then where are you going to go?
yeah.
Because it's 2 to 6 months before you're getting in a treatment center. You know, Thunder Bay here, you have 2 different recovery places you can go to. 2. That's it. it's it's the support's not out there yet, right? It's really not. And addiction revolves around mental health, as we all know. And the support's not out there. If you want to get a counselor, even in that, okay, you're on another waiting list. And addicts don't have that time, especially with the supply that's out there today.
Yeah, totally. There's a couple of things I want to acknowledge. So one, Fariel wanted to ask you a little bit about your trauma, and I know you already talked about that. So I'm just going to ask Fariel to tune into the earlier section of the episode just to catch a little bit of that. Or if there was something specific about the trauma that you actually wanted to know, just ask another question. I love what you were talking about routine because for some of the listeners out here, thanks Marielle. For some of the listeners out here, they're from my community, some are from yours, but I spend time behind the scenes with people teaching them things like breath work and routine and doing stuff like that. And you brought up a really good point of the routine that you have every day. And again, there's that same parallel of why it's important. And then the other thing that you brought up is timeline. And I think in general society, it's people want to go to the gym, get buff, then they stop going to the gym. Like all of these things are very parallel with a lot of things. And I want you to talk about what you've learned about the commitment, the timeline, the fact that you can never take a vacation from going after like the cleanliness that you have right now, recovery. And because I think, after 3 weeks of a new routine, it gets boring and you want to slack a little bit and you want to try something different. And okay, cool. Yeah. What practices does Kyle find helpful to his recovery journey? Thanks for summing it up for me there, girl.
um, and like this is my program. So like for me, I follow a 12-step program of Narcotics Anonymous. I'm also kind of a mix with AA as well. Although I'm not a drinker, I am an alcoholic in the sense that the moment I put alcohol in my system. I'm a blackout drinker, and really, I don't like alcohol. It just makes me want drugs. So I follow a 12-step program, which is, I have a sponsor, I have a support group that I talk to daily, sometimes hourly. And I do a 12-step program, which involves the 12 steps. People can look it up. It'll explain it a little bit more. But in there, I go over yearly, every year, and it takes 8 to 12 months to do it. I go over everything from my past traumas to how I treat people to resentments I have. I live my life as an open book with at least one other person. I have an amazing sponsor, Jay, who's, I went over my steps with him, and, I'm telling him my deepest, darkest secrets. But I had to look at that deep, dark secret and look at where was my part in it. It's easy for an addict. I could always find where everybody else went wrong, but where did I go wrong to create this? Why do I hate that person? Why do I hate that person? What did they do to me? Well, that's easy for me to find out, but what did I do to them? Right? And that's what I had to start looking, is that for everything in the world that ever affected me, I had a part to play. And so for me, like we call it a step 10 every night, I look at how I treated people that day, and I look at, if I offended that person, did I talk to them about how I offended them? Did I apologize? Did I make an amends? And constantly living that way of life. Because, I feel like everybody in the world should do a 12-step program, because it taught me to be accountable. That was the biggest thing for me, is to learn that I had to be accountable for my actions. Mm-hmm. If I go out and then I'm rude to someone, it's my job to apologize and take responsibility. I can't just slap it off because my actions affected them, right? And that's not right. Just like I wouldn't want them doing that to me. But it's also one of my favorite phrases is, it's not my business anymore what other people think of me. Mm-hmm. Right? All I can do is my best. And I had to stop worrying what everybody else thought, because I did that my whole life. And a lot of my tattoos were based merely on intimidation. I put a wall up, to try to, invoke fear in people, because I wanted them to stay away, right? And I had to survive. And so I guess daily, a 12-step program, Narcotics Anonymous, and for me, prayer, higher mm-hmm. power. I don't call my higher power God. I'm not saying I am baptized. I do have a belief in God, but I sum it up to higher power.
Yeah, like something greater than yourself.
Yeah, for me, my higher power is a mixture between God, my father, and my grandfather up there. So that's kind of what I do. And I stay very involved. I guess I can touch on that a little. I'm very involved with the narcotic program in Thunder Bay in Northern Ontario. I got encouraged very early on, I mentioned it, to do service work. The lady I call Mom now, Brenda, her and I are actually the chairs of the public relations for Narcotics Anonymous in Northern Ontario, and she's teaching me kind of how to do this, and get the word out in a positive way, right? And it's taught me how to, I guess, deal with the public in a professional way, because I didn't know how to do that at all, right? And it's helped me. Narcotics Anonymous, they taught me how to work on myself, but it also, going to business meetings every month in Narcotics Anonymous, taught me, once I got a job, how to go to business meetings there, right? Which was really important. So.
Mm-hmm. So all of this can be incredibly overwhelming for people. This is a lot of work you've been doing for the last 2 years. Like, you've come a long way, and there's probably people that want to go from zero to hero and not be patient with it. And so I'm curious to know, there's a couple questions in here, if you want to touch on quickly. So Yeah, Dee asked if, pretty much at the same time you said it, she was asking if the 12 steps were transferable to anybody struggling with their shadow, addict or not. And you said, yeah, I think everybody should do the 12 steps. And then Faryel asked, how do you pray? I don't know if you have like a sentence on that. I know it's different for everybody, but if there's any sort of guideline that you could give her, it looks like she's looking for some guidance.
My prayers normally include more giving thanks.
Okay.
I thank my higher power every day for recovery. If I ask for anything, it's guidance, tolerance.
Yeah.
And then my prayers revolve around my family. And one of the earliest things I was taught in recovery is if I don't like someone, I pray for them every night. And, you know, I had one person I didn't like. I prayed for them for over a year. And now they're my friend.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really important to me is, yeah, my prayer I learned a long time ago. You know, the only time I prayed before recovery was in a jail cell or the back of a cop car, you know. So I make sure my prayer is more giving thanks, you know, and asking my higher power to watch over my family, my loved ones, you know, and the people I don't like.
Yeah, doing the damn work. So then let's go back to, and we'll probably try to wrap this up soon, but it's just too good right now. So let's go back to the patience in the process. And I want you to just talk about kind of the inner workings of your mind. And Jay Morrison, thanks for praying for me, Kyle. I want you to just talk a little bit about the inner workings of your mind as you know, to get to where you are today took 2 years of work, you know, plus like so much struggle. And how did you, I don't know if anything's coming through for you that you think is relevant to share with people, to like be patient, be present, how you were able to believe in yourself when it was dark, how you were able to keep going when it was too hard, all that stuff.
You know, I don't think I could have done all of that. For me, it was turning it over to a higher power, but it was for, you know, people like Shy Morrison there, like Shy Sneakerhead, parts of my support group that I could call, right? And that was huge for me, is being able to call people in this program to help me, because at times, I didn't believe in myself. You know, I had a sponsor, Jay, that, man, he showed up to my recovery house at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning sometimes to talk me off walking off a cliff, in a sense, in my head, right? Because it was hard, extremely hard, because I spent, you know, 18 years of my life that when anything was any type of emotion, I just went to drugs. So all of a sudden, when that stopped happening, I was lost, right? And I've gone through many dark times, especially in the first 6 months of my recovery, where, like, man, I didn't know what to do, right? I was frustrated. And, you know, it goes back to my mom, when she could finally admit to herself, we both learned at the same time, like, that she couldn't do this for me, you know. And she even started telling me, when I would call her in those hard times, you need to call your sponsor. You know, and having, you know, she jumped into my life so much that when she came and visited me, she met my sponsor, she met my recovery crew, you know, and kind of, how do you say it, like, almost gave it the blessing that I needed to hear. The fact that she's like, man, these are good people. Like, you know, once your mom tells you that about people, for me, it was like, all right, like, this is concrete, you know. And, you know, my street brother called me. He had just got out of prison at 3 months. I was 3 months sober, and he offered to come get me out of here, you know. And I told him, I'm going to try this recovery thing. And he supported me, you know. And here's a guy that was an addict, right? And he's telling me, like, you need recovery, man. Like, you're out of control. And I'm sitting there going, who are you to talk, bro?
Yeah.
Right. But he could see it, right? And he's like, you're changing. Like, this is good.
Yeah.
So, you know, having that and living in a facility where I had counselors there 24 hours a day, I could wake up at any time and go and say, hey, I need to talk. Or I could go knock on a door, you know, and say, I need to talk, you know. My first roommate in 3Cs, Johnny, man, I don't know how many times I woke up and like, hey, man, I need to talk. Hey, man, I need to talk, you know. And it was great. We were both the most probably tattooed guys in the city. We both had face tattoos, but he called me on my shit, you know, and because especially in the beginning, like you don't know what to do, right? You don't know. And so for me, just constantly reaching out, we call it picking up that 1,000-pound phone. And we just, you call and reach out to, and for me, it was for people in this program because they knew what I was going through. You know, mom can tell me she loves me till she's blue in the face, but she can't tell me how I feel when I'm kicking dope or when I want to throw away everything that I worked for just to go have a hit of dope. She can't tell me I know how you feel. And that's what I needed. I needed people to say, I know how you feel because they do, because they went through it, right? You know, everybody thinks that the first time you tell all your sponsor your deep, dark secrets, they're going to be like, oh my God, really? No, they've heard it from 20 other people if they've been around long enough, right? There was no like, oh my God. There's nothing I told him that was, you know, there was no big surprise on his face, you know, some chuckles. And when we were done, he's like, all right, you're good. And I'm like, you know, I'm looking for the cop cars thinking I'm going to jail, right? And it wasn't like that. So for me, it was that connection with like-minded people that could relate to what I was going through, you know, and I don't, as I said before, I don't want to downplay education, but that can only get you so far. You know, you learn from a book how to deal with us addicts, and that's commendable. And I, you know, I do have counselors. In the beginning, I do want to say this. In the beginning, I had most of my counselors were ex-addicts. But I had this one counselor, and she was never been an addict. And actually, the lady that ran the house that I lived in, she'd never been an addict, and I wanted nothing to do with them, right? I'm like, you got no clue, you know, but they had family members that had gone through addiction. And once I sat down and actually shut up, I could start to, you know, hear some of that information, and I was able to find a connection. But for me, the biggest connections that I've found constantly are other addicts, you know, because they know what it's like, right? Normies, there's never a time that a normal person woke up and are like, all right, well, we're going to go rob this person today and we're going to go rob this store. And that seems like a great idea, right? There's no normie that really does that, right? But we do it to survive, right? It's what we have to do to survive, you know, because every addict out there, to me, I think the best word to describe them is survivor. We've survived trauma over and over again. You know, we're survivors of every scenario you can imagine we've gone through generally, you know. And I think that's where we're misunderstood. And, you know, as I said before, the choice thing, those are the biggest misconceptions of us. So.
I really want to highlight something that you said that we kind of just like brushed over. It was like so fucking like profound. And you're like, yeah, you talked about when you actually stopped talking and you listened, you were able to hear, you know, and you were able to receive, and then your whole perspective on another human being changed and you were able to connect with them. And I think that's really powerful to highlight again. So for the people that are feeling lonely, feeling victim, like they're a victim, to really take the time to slow down, stop talking, listen, and really try to feel into the truth of somebody and the intention of somebody and the purity of, like, you know, it's an energetic exchange with the people. Like my hippie self is going to be like, yeah, the energy of the person, but it's really feeling because you're an extremely sensitive human being, as I think that we all are. So that stop talking, listen, and you can hear the truth is really, really powerful. There was a really good question from D again. So the question was, and it's good because I actually want to know as well. So she said, how can Passion Pilgrim support outreach and recovery efforts of organizations through which Kyle volunteers? And so with Passion Pilgrim, my brand, what I'm supporting, because when you like want to help everything, and so what I support is a foundation on Lombok that sends kids to school, and I send a couple kids to school on Lombok, and we've done a lot of support really in the same village that we make all of the jewelry that comes from this brand. But she wants to know, how can Passion Pilgrim, how can we support you, and streamline if they feel called to then go to this outreach community. And so it's cool. Like, do you have any ideas of what I can do to support you personally, and what our community can do to support you guys? Aside from, I love that people are listening to the conversation and educating themselves on it.
I think by getting the word out there, that one of the biggest things that I believe the world focuses on, and I touched it in the beginning, is we can do news, put the news on every hour and hear all these bad things that our addicts are doing. But where are the interviews, like with someone like myself that's working on recovery? Where are those in the world, right? Why aren't those being talked about enough? Why aren't those being broadcast more, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's important. My buddy in Vancouver, Scotty H, he's really been working on that at a higher level, trying to get it so addicts have a voice, so that when we're in recovery, we can show people like we do recover.
Yeah.
But the world is behind. We don't have enough detoxes. We don't have enough treatment centers, right? But the more you guys can get the word out there, the more you can show that people do have a chance. There's more opportunity there, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned it in a post I made yesterday, and I want to be super clear about this. There's nothing special about me that's any different than any addict out there.
Mm-hmm.
I found recovery. The right people were put in my life at the right time. But there's no reason that any other addict can't do the same. I was a low bottom addict, right? And the last time I picked up off a needle off the ground full of dope to do it. In the AA book, we call it a last gasper. I was on my way out, a couple heart attacks, a stroke. I'd spent my good part of my life in addiction. I can line up probably 100 people that'll tell you that I was never going to get clean. And I felt that. I never thought I'd get clean. I'm sure most of my family was pretty skeptical at times, right? And someone just said it perfect right there. Providing platforms for these types of talks. That's huge, because the world needs to hear that we do recover, that there is hope, and especially during this time of quarantine, lockdown, COVID, like a lot of people are sitting at home and they don't know what to do, right? And instead of just letting them, die in alcohol and drugs, like getting messages like this out there of hope is, I believe, what needs to happen, because there is hope for addicts. If you look at what addicts do in the world when they come back, it's unbelievable. Unbelievable. So yeah, that says it great right there, the providing platforms so that people can get on these and hear the message.
Yeah. Cool. So for everybody that's listening, so obviously this is going to be posted to our Instagram page, so you can share this in your stories, and then I'll also post it on my YouTube channel, like a copy of this. I'll have to download it and stuff. And so if you guys want to share it on Facebook, you can do that as well. And then, you and me can talk behind closed doors about, how to set up a YouTube page. I'll show you how to do that. And
all right.
And then, okay, so she's got one more question. Okay, now we need a blog entry, Kayla, or maybe even a man mala inspired by Kyle's story. Well, Kyle likes the rise mala, so but yeah, I think as 2021 kind of progresses, you and I can talk a little bit more about a specific way to plug people into, essentially what was a huge part of who I am, which is you, and finding a way to support your passion, because like the reason you're here is because you're a passion pilgrim too. You have an unshakable commitment to create, connect, and explore in your own way. So
Well, and I think it's super important, like
yeah.
I looked at the numbers in Canada this year, and not that I'm downplaying it, but COVID didn't kill the most people in Canada.
Hmm.
ODs did this year.
Yeah.
For me, like hearing that, like that's the true epidemic to me.
Pandemic.
Pandemic
Hmm.
is the fact that so many addicts are dying, and the world doesn't do a lockdown for them.
Hmm.
And are we building more facilities, more detoxes? Why is that not happening? Right? They need help.
Hmm.
You know, when diseases happen in the world pivots and helps with the problem. But with addicts, I feel like it just gets swept under the carpet over and over again. And addiction doesn't just happen at low levels of people with not a lot of money. It happens all over the place. How many movie stars have we lost to addiction? you know and I think there needs to be more of an awareness. But I also believe that part of recovery, and I would like to just mention, is harm reduction,
Hmm.
right? If not all addicts want to do what I've done, they don't want to get clean. But I feel as society, we need to meet them where they're at. And I believe that, clean supplies for them using, safe injection sites are amazing. Um, Safe injection sites in Canada, we've never had a death.
Hmm.
You know, hundreds of thousands of people have used them for, to use drugs, but we've never had a death. Why are we not getting behind that? Why are people not getting behind safe supply? Why can't we meet people where they're at? My story is recovery. That's what worked for me. But I also understand with my job and stuff that we need to meet people where they're at and support them where they're at. They're
Hmm.
humans and they're entitled to just as much as anybody else, right?
Yeah. Beautiful. Um, One other thing I want to touch on
Yeah.
is that I found really inspiring, because I remember when COVID started and there was that lockdown, like even you and I got in an argument about your choices. And, I think COVID has started a lot of arguments with a lot of people. And so you were very firm in your beliefs, and you went and did it, and it ultimately kept you clean. And one of the things that isn't being talked about on the headlines as much as how much relapse there's been during COVID and 2020 as a whole, because of this idle time, lack of purpose, when people's kind of purpose gets taken away and things like that. And you went through a situation where Kaylin's so cute. And you went through a situation where you weren't, I think your job was changing or something. So can you just touch on briefly what you experienced at the beginning of lockdown, what your choices were, and how that ultimately led to you staying clean?
When lockdown happened, my outreach position was suspended due to this pandemic. So I quickly pivoted, and that's when I went and started at the shelter, because I needed to stay involved. Because, like, I'm an addict, I just can't sit at home for months on end, and I believe that for me, I had to continue to stay busy and continue to stay connected and give back, right? And get involved wherever I could. And for me, the last thing I was really worried about was COVID.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that I owed this world to be able to give back. And that's why I went to the homeless shelter during that time when, the homeless shelter was running low on employees because, of course, people were hearing COVID and they were taking time off. And I was like, all right, well, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to stay involved because when I came into recovery, people didn't base whether they were going to help me on the weather outside or what was going on in the world or anything. They were there with their hands out no matter what. There
Mm-hmm.
was nothing that stopped them, you know? My sponsor got up from dinners with his wife, you know, and came running. He put, you know what I mean? He put everything on hold to come and make sure I was okay. So
Yeah.
I felt that it was my job to get involved and give back to the community. And, you know, if I had to wear some extra PPE, so be it. I was going to give back.
Mhm.
And, you know, I remember saying to you when COVID hit there, I would rather die helping people than, you know, lying on a couch.
Mhm.
I really wanted to give back and stay super involved, and that's what I did, right? And I just, for me, I feel that's important.
Yeah.
I've you know, I've created some serious havoc on different people's lives, and I can't make those amends to their face, so I make what we call living amends, and I give back to the communities, and you know,
Yeah. Cool.
but
Super powerful.
really, I'm just following the footsteps of other people before me, right? I take it to my own level and do it my way, but I was taught, you know, if you want to stay clean and sober, you got to, you know, you give back, and that's what I try to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And it's a very humble approach as well. Like you talked a lot about your ego and I mean, both how it kept you in addiction and ultimately kind of helped get you clean too when it got smashed a little bit, but also the humility of, I mean, they say it in, you know, one of the steps, like the first step, like admitting that you're powerless. Um, and I think the humility of what you're saying of knowing that you don't have it all figured out. And so you're going to allow somebody to hold up the light and you're going to go towards the light, you know, because somebody's got a fucking flashlight. Why are you hanging out in the dark, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's beautiful what you talked about the humility of that and really, yeah, putting your own kind of self aside a little bit.
Yeah. And sometimes I feel like I try to be the voice for the people that can't be. Some of them aren't here, and some of them are struggling in addiction. And, you know, the people I meet on the streets here are like, you know, some of the best people I've ever met in my life was
Mm-hmm.
in addiction, you know, and some of them are here, few of them, most of them are not. And, you know, they met me where I was at, but, and they helped stand me up those days of my addiction when I couldn't. So I feel that my job now is to, you know, I reach out and I connect with people, and, you know, maybe because they're using or they're at a shelter, their voice isn't heard. But
Mm-hmm.
now that I can be that person that has a job, you know, I can make their voice heard. And to me, that's very important, right?
Yeah.
Because I remember where I came from. And, you know, I still talk to people on my Facebook that are still, you know, choosing their own life and they're in their addiction. And I support them where they're at. And, you know, that's why I like to share my story, because, you know what? I was a horrible junkie. I was as bad as they come in a lot of ways, right? Like I was hopeless, and I made it out. And I want addicts to know everywhere, like, it's never too late. Absolutely. You know, I'm no professor. I'm no different than anybody else in addiction. I just chose to reach out and to stand up and try.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it came down to. And, you know, I asked for help, and hmm,
Over and over and over again, you know?
yeah, yeah, exactly. And this time it stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And it really did, because this time, you know, you mentioned it earlier, I surrendered.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I absolutely surrendered and admitted that I was powerless over drugs and alcohol. No matter how many times I try to quit and stop, I always end up with the same results, right? You know, that's why I got on my face years ago the word freedom, because whenever, you know, I would try those little bleeps of recovery, I felt free finally. And but this time I truly feel it, right? Because I don't wake up sick anymore. You know, I don't put anybody's life at risk to get what I want, because when I'm using, I really don't give a shit about anybody but
Mm-hmm.
my drugs. And it's not by choice. It's just that obsession starts in me, and it doesn't, there's nothing that stops it, right? And that's why my recovery is for the rest of my life. it's constantly working on it, constantly working on myself and moving forward. And, you know, some days it's 3 steps back or 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. Sometimes it's 1 step forward, 3 steps back. But
Yeah.
as long as I keep moving, then we're making progress.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also want to highlight the massive tone of self-acceptance that you're bringing in as well. I think in any sort of personal development world, there's the whole, you got to love yourself before you love somebody else. You got to accept yourself. Stuff, and everything that you're saying is really like, with that surrender, there was a massive self-acceptance, and then an ability that once you accepted the way that you are, you learned how to love that person, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's really important, because you don't need to be any different than who you are, you know, like, you've inspired me the whole time. I'm just glad that you get to hang out after, and you know, the story can continue, as opposed to inspiring me in the ways that you have and you're not even around to enjoy it with me. It was like, yeah, now you're here and now we can have these conversations. And like, you know, for anybody out there that's struggling with addiction, I'd encourage you to reach out to Kyle. For anybody out there who's struggling with loving somebody with addiction, please reach out to me. Yeah, it's like so many waves of emotions kind of keep coming through, and I'm like lost my words, and like, you know, it's really near and dear to my heart, this journey of yours, and really what it's been a journey of our entire family, you know, like you're the oldest of 5 kids. Every single one of us suffered going through this. One of
It's
us,
a family disease.
yeah,
I saw a post about that a few days ago. When I say it's a family disease, it's, you can have one addict in the family, but it affects everybody, right?
Everybody. And it really, yeah, it was a lot. So it's just the greatest gift in the world that when I used to talk to you and I'd still meet up with you and you were using, and it was all I could get from you, you know, I still, you know, did my best to love you in that state. But I really, a lot of the time, felt like there was somebody that took over your body and was walking around with my brother's face, and it wasn't cool. And now it's like, in just such a small amount of time, to be able to connect with you on the depth that we connect is it's the brother that I lost and I didn't have when I was a teenager, but having it now, just, you forget what you didn't have, you know? So it's really nice.
You bet.
Love you.
I love you too.
And thank you so much for just being real and raw, publicly and also privately. And anybody that's looking to reach out, please do. Please share this. You never know who's quiet about struggle and who really wants to listen to this stuff. And yeah, you and I will go offline and chat about a YouTube page maybe.
All right.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Well, if anybody wants to reach out, you can look me up on Facebook, Kyle Coast. Yeah, feel free to add me up.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. I love you.
Love you too.
Love you, Mom.
Love you, Mom. Love you, Kaylin.
Yeah, I love you, Caitlin. Love you, Sandy. Bye.
Bye.